Kate Morrison checked her equipment one last time before stepping out of the transport shuttle. The rocky surface of Valdris Prime stretched endlessly before her team. Red dust swirled in the alien wind as she adjusted her breathing mask. This was supposed to be the discovery of a lifetime. Dr. Lydia Ashworth stood nearby, examining her scanner. The tall elf woman had perfect silver hair that never seemed out of place even on alien worlds. Her pointed ears twitched slightly as she read the data. Kate had worked with elves before, but Lydia was different. Cold, always watching Kate with those pale blue eyes like she was studying a lab specimen. The third member of their team buzzed around them in excited circles. Zara clicked her mandibles as she spoke in her clicking language. The insect alien was almost as tall as Kate, but moved with jerky motions that reminded Kate of a praying mantis. Her forearms constantly moved as she gathered samples and took readings. Kate shouldered her pack and followed the others toward the cave entrance. According to their scans, the dragon creatures lived deep inside these mountain caves. No one had ever seen them up close and lived to tell about it. The three species had been trying to study these legendary beings for decades. The cave mouth yawned open like a hungry beast. Kate felt her heart rate increase as they walked into the darkness. Their helmet lights cut through the gloom, revealing smooth stone walls, covered in strange markings. The air smelled different here, warmer, almost alive. Lydia moved ahead with confident steps. She had been studying these creatures longer than anyone. Her research grants from the Elven Science Council were massive. This expedition was her chance to make history. Kate was just here as the human representative, someone to carry equipment and take notes. They walked deeper into the cave system, following Lydia's scanner readings. The tunnels branched off in multiple directions, but Lydia seemed to know exactly where to go. Hours passed as they descended through the winding passages. Kate began to notice the walls were getting warmer to the touch. Zara stopped suddenly and made rapid clicking sounds. Her translator device was having trouble with her excited speech. Finally it managed to convert her words. She had detected massive life signs ahead. Multiple creatures. Large ones. Lydia smiled for the first time since they had landed. She pulled out a strange device Kate had never seen before. It looked like a medical scanner, but with modifications that gleamed with alien technology. Kate started to ask what it was, but Lydia held up her hand for silence. They crept forward until they reached a vast underground chamber. Kate gasped at what she saw. Dozens of creatures lay sleeping in organized groups across the cavern floor. They were magnificent. Each one was the size of a small spacecraft with scales that shimmered in their helmet lights. Massive wings were folded against their sides. These were the dragons of Valdris Prime. But these were not adult dragons. Kate realized with growing excitement that they had found a nursery. Young dragons of various sizes lay curled together in family groups. Some were no bigger than Kate herself, while others were already the size of ground vehicles. Lydia began scanning, Kate with her modified device, while Kate was distracted by the sleeping dragons. The readings made the elf woman smile coldly. Zara moved to block the cave entrance behind them, without Kate noticing. Kate turned around when she heard strange beeping sounds from Lydia's scanner. The elf woman was staring at the device with wide eyes. She looked at Kate with a new expression. Not cold anymore, but hungry. Like she had just discovered something valuable. Lydia spoke quietly to Zara, in the clicking language. Kate frowned. Since her translator should have been working, she realized they were using a private communication frequency. The two aliens were having a conversation she could not understand. Kate felt the first stirring of worry. Something was wrong. Lydia and Zara were acting strange. They kept looking at her, and then at their scanners. The excited discovery mood had changed into something else. Something that made Kate want to move closer to the cave entrance. But Zara was still standing near the entrance. Her four arms were now holding weapons Kate had not seen her draw. The insect alien's large compound eyes reflected the helmet lights as she watched Kate carefully. Lydia finished her conversation with Zara and turned to Kate with a false smile. She explained that Kate had tested positive for something very rare, a genetic marker that the dragons responded to in unique ways. Kate was potentially the key to understanding these creatures. Kate felt relief wash over her. Of course they were excited. This was exactly the kind of breakthrough they had hoped for. She asked what they needed her to do. How could she help with the research? Lydia and Zara exchanged another look. The elf woman walked closer to Kate and began removing equipment from her pack. She handed Kate an emergency beacon and a small food synthesizer. Enough supplies for maybe 2 days. Kate stared at the meager supplies in confusion. Why was Lydia giving her emergency gear? They had a full base camp waiting back at the shuttle. She asked if something was wrong with their main equipment. Lydia shook her head and explained that Kate would be staying here, alone, with the dragons. Her genetic marker meant she needed to be exposed to them for extended periods. The dragons had to get used to her scent and presence. Only then could real communication begin. Kate felt ice forming in her stomach. She looked around the vast cavern full of sleeping dragon young. Some of them were starting to stir at the sound of voices. She asked how long she would need to stay. When would they come back for her? Zara made clicking sounds that her translator converted into laughter. Lydia simply smiled and began walking toward the cave entrance. She called back that they would return when the dragons had fully accepted Kate, or when they found her remains. Kate ran after them, but Zara raised her weapons. The insect alien made it clear that Kate was to stay in the nursery chamber. Any attempt to follow would result in immediate stunning. Kate would wake up alone either way. The truth hit Kate like a physical blow. They were abandoning her. This was not research. This was murder. They wanted her genetic marker, but they did not want her alive to benefit from the discovery. The elves and aliens would claim credit for any breakthrough while Kate died alone in a dragon nursery. Lydia paused at the entrance and looked back one final time. She told Kate that humans had always been expendable in the great game of galactic politics. This was simply how science worked. The strong species survived and prospered, while the weak ones provided useful data. Then they were gone. Kate heard their footsteps echoing through the tunnels as they returned to the surface. Soon even those sounds faded, leaving her alone in the chamber with dozens of young dragons. Kate sank to her knees as the reality of her situation sank in. She was trapped underground with creatures that could kill her instantly. She had supplies for 2 days at most. No way to call for help since her communication equipment had been in the main pack that Lydia took. Around her the dragon young were waking up. Large eyes opened and focused on the strange new presence in their home. Kate could hear adult dragons moving somewhere deeper in the cave system. Soon they would come to investigate the intruder in their nursery. Kate Morrison had been left to die among the dragons. But she was human, and humans did not die easily. Kate forced herself to stay perfectly still as the young dragons began to wake around her. She counted at least 30 of them in the immediate area. Their scales caught the light from her helmet as they stretched and yawned. Massive teeth gleamed, in mouths that could easily swallow her whole. The smallest dragon was about the size of a large dog. It opened bright golden eyes and stared directly at Kate. She held her breath, waiting for it to cry out or attack. Instead, the young creature tilted its head to one side like a curious puppy. It made a soft chirping sound. Other dragons began to notice her presence. They did not roar or bare their teeth as Kate expected. Instead, they watched her with the same curious expression. A few of the larger ones stood up and walked closer. Kate remained frozen as they sniffed the air around her. One dragon that was about the size of a horse lowered its great head until it was inches from Kate. Its nostrils flared as it breathed in her scent. Kate could feel the warm air from its breathing on her face. The dragon made a rumbling sound deep in its throat that almost sounded like purring. Kate slowly reached out her hand toward the creature. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she had nowhere to go. The dragon watched her hand approach, and then gently bumped its snout against her palm. The contact sent a shock of surprise through Kate. The scales were warm and surprisingly soft. More dragons approached, wanting to investigate this strange new creature. Kate found herself surrounded by curious young faces. They seemed to have no fear of her at all. In fact, they appeared to be welcoming her into their group. Kate carefully stood up and looked around the chamber. She needed to find water and shelter if she was going to survive more than a few days. The dragons watched her movements with interest, but did not try to stop her from exploring. She discovered a small stream running along one wall of the cavern. The water was clear and cold. Kate tested it carefully with her portable analyzer and found it was safe to drink. The dragons had been using this same water source, so it made sense that it would be clean. Near the stream, Kate found an alcove in the rock wall that would provide some shelter. It was large enough for her to lie down, but small enough that she could defend it, if necessary. She began moving her few supplies into this makeshift shelter. The smallest dragon followed her as she worked. It seemed fascinated by everything Kate did. When she unpacked her food synthesizer, the little creature watched intently as she programmed it to produce a basic meal. The machine hummed and produced a small bar of processed nutrients. Kate took a bite, and the dragon made the chirping sound. Again, she looked at the eager expression on its face and realized it wanted to try the food. Kate broke off a small piece and offered it to the dragon. The creature sniffed it carefully, then gobbled it up immediately. Soon Kate had a dozen young dragons gathered around her asking for food. She quickly realized her synthesizer could not produce enough to feed them all. She would need to find another solution, or she would starve, while trying to keep them happy. Kate began exploring the cave system to understand how the dragons found food. She discovered that the adults brought fresh meat from hunts outside. They also ate certain glowing fungi that grew on the cave walls. Kate tested the fungi with her analyzer and found they were rich in proteins and safe for human consumption. The young dragons seemed impressed that Kate could identify good food sources. They began showing her other edible plants that grew in the deeper parts of the cave system. Kate realized they were teaching her how to survive in their environment. As days passed, Kate established a routine. She would wake up surrounded by sleeping dragons who seemed to enjoy her warmth. She would gather fungi and edible plants while the dragons played around her. In the evenings, they would all curl up together for warmth and protection. Kate began to understand the social structure of the dragon family. The smaller ones looked up to the larger ones for guidance. They communicated through a combination of sounds, body language, and what seemed like telepathic connections. Kate could not hear their mental communications, but she could see how they responded to each other. She started giving names to the dragons she spent the most time with. The smallest one she called Luna, because of its bright golden eyes that reminded her of moonlight. A medium-sized dragon with dark blue scales became Storm. The largest young dragon had red and orange scales like fire, so she called it Ember. Luna followed Kate everywhere and seemed to understand simple commands. Storm was more independent, but would come when Kate called. Ember appeared to be the leader of the young dragons and made decisions about where the group would go and what they would do. Kate began teaching them simple human words while learning their own language of sounds and gestures. Within weeks, they could communicate basic ideas. The dragons were incredibly intelligent. They learned faster than any animal Kate had ever studied. The breakthrough came when Kate realized the dragons were not just intelligent animals. They were people. They had individual personalities, opinions, and emotions. They laughed when something amused them. They comforted each other when hurt or scared. They made art by arranging stones in beautiful patterns. Kate found ancient cave paintings deep in the tunnel system. The images showed dragons and humanoid figures working together, building structures, flying through space, and sharing knowledge. The paintings were thousands of years old. but they clearly depicted cooperation between dragons and beings that looked remarkably human. She realized that dragons and humans had worked together before. The genetic marker that Lydia detected was not just compatibility, it was proof of an ancient alliance. Humans and dragons had been partners long ago. Before humans left their original homeworld, the adult dragons began returning from their hunts. While Kate was studying the cave paintings, she heard their massive wings beating as they landed outside the nursery chamber. Kate felt terror grip her as she realized she was about to meet creatures that could incinerate her with their breath. But the young dragons gathered around Kate protectively. Luna chirped loudly, as if announcing something important. Storm and Ember positioned themselves between Kate and the approaching adults. The message was clear. Kate was under their protection. The first adult dragon entered the chamber, and Kate understood why these creatures were legendary. It was enormous, easily 3 times the size of the largest young dragon. Its scales were deep purple and seemed to absorb light. Ancient intelligent eyes focused on Kate with laser intensity. Kate expected to die in that moment. Instead, the adult dragon lowered its great head in what could only be described as a bow. It made a deep rumbling sound that the young dragons answered with excited chirps. Luna ran to the adult and then back to Kate, as if introducing them. The adult dragon approached slowly and carefully. When it reached Kate, it gently touched her forehead with the tip of its snout. Kate felt a strange tingling sensation, and suddenly, she could sense the dragon's emotions. Approval, welcome, recognition. Kate Morrison was no longer a prisoner in the dragon nursery. She was family. Kate woke up 3 months later with Luna curled against her side and Storm stretched across her legs like a living blanket. The young dragons had grown considerably since her arrival. Luna was now the size of a pony, while Storm had reached the proportions of a small vehicle. Ember had grown even larger and was beginning to show signs of reaching adolescence. The morning routine had become second nature. Kate would gather the glowing fungi for breakfast while the dragons played in the stream. They had learned to bring her fruits and roots from the upper cave tunnels, where plant life was more abundant. In return, Kate had taught them games and songs from human culture. Kate had also become proficient in dragon communication. Their language was complex, involving not just sounds, but subtle changes in scale, color, body, position, and even chemical signals. She could now hold basic conversations with both the young dragons and the adults who visited regularly. The adult dragons treated Kate with a respect that surprised her. They brought her gifts of rare metals and beautiful stones from their deep territory explorations. When she showed interest in the ancient cave paintings, they guided her to hidden chambers, filled with even older artwork and artifacts. Kate discovered that the dragons had an advanced understanding of astronomy and engineering. The cave systems were not natural formations, but carefully constructed cities that extended deep into the planet. The dragons had built these underground civilizations thousands of years ago, using techniques that combined biological and mechanical engineering. The young dragons were eager to show Kate their world. Storm had learned to carry her on short flights through the larger caverns. The sensation of flying on dragonback was unlike anything Kate had ever experienced. She felt the powerful muscles moving beneath her as Storm navigated through the 3-dimensional maze of tunnels and chambers. Ember had developed what could only be called a crush on Kate. The young dragon would bring her elaborate gifts and perform aerial displays to try to impress her. Kate found this both amusing and touching. Ember was clearly intelligent enough to experience complex emotions. Despite being what other species would consider a dangerous beast, Luna remained her constant companion and had appointed herself as Kate's personal protector. When other dragons played too roughly, Luna would intervene with sharp chirps and aggressive posturing. The little dragon had also learned to operate some of Kate's human equipment and would help her with daily tasks. Kate began teaching the dragons about human technology and culture. They were fascinated by her stories of space travel and different worlds. In return, they shared their own histories and legends. Kate learned that dragons had once traveled between stars using methods that combined their natural flight abilities with technological enhancements. The dragons explained through their complex communication that humans and dragons had been created by the same ancient civilization. Both species carried genetic markers that allowed them to bond and work together. Other species like elves and aliens had been created separately and lacked this compatibility. This revelation explained why Kate could communicate with the dragons, while other species could only observe them from a distance. It also explained why Lydia and Zara had abandoned her. They knew that if humans established a partnership with dragons, the balance of power in the galaxy would shift dramatically. Kate spent weeks exploring the deeper levels of the Dragon City with her companions. She discovered workshops where dragons crafted tools and art using methods that combined their breath weapons with traditional techniques. She found libraries containing thousands of years of recorded knowledge stored in crystalline matrices that responded to dragon bioelectricity. Most importantly, Kate found the ancient alliance chambers, where humans and dragons had once worked together. The rooms contained equipment sized for both species and artwork depicting their joint achievements. Spacecraft designed by human engineers and powered by dragon energy. Colonies established on distant worlds by mixed crews. Kate realized that she was rediscovering a lost chapter of human history. Before humans had spread across the galaxy, they had been part of a powerful alliance with the most magnificent species ever known. For unknown reasons, this partnership had ended, and humans had forgotten their dragon heritage. The adult dragons began, including Kate, in important ceremonies and decisions. She learned that the dragon society was more complex than she had imagined. Different families specialized in different skills, like engineering exploration or artistic creation. Kate was being accepted not just as a friend, but as a member of their civilization. Storm had grown large enough to carry Kate on longer flights outside the cave system. They would soar through the skies of Valdris Prime, exploring the vast landscapes and ruins of ancient cities. Kate discovered that the planet had once been covered with structures built by the Dragon-Human Alliance. Now only foundations remained, hidden beneath centuries of plant growth. During these flights, Kate began to understand the true scope of what had been lost. This had not been a simple partnership, but a galaxy-spanning civilization. Humans and dragons working together had achieved things that neither species could accomplish alone. The ruins they flew over were just a small part of what had once existed. Ember reached full adolescence and was now larger than some of the adult dragons Kate had first encountered. The young dragon had developed the ability to generate controlled flames and was learning to use this power for crafting and construction. Ember insisted on teaching Kate these same skills, adapting the techniques so she could participate despite lacking dragon biology. Kate found herself becoming not just a survivor, but a student of dragon culture. She learned their mathematics, which was based on three-dimensional thinking, and their engineering principles, which used organic materials in ways human technology had never achieved. The dragons in turn were eager to learn about human innovation and adaptability. The three young dragons had become her family in a way that felt more real than any relationship Kate had experienced with her own species. They cared for her, protected her, and included her in every aspect of their lives. Kate realized she had found something on Valdris Prime that she had been searching for her entire life without knowing it. A place where she belonged. Kate stood on a high ledge overlooking the main dragon city with Luna, Storm, and Ember beside her. The vast caverns stretched out below them, filled with dragons going about their daily lives. Workshops glowed with the light of controlled fires. Young dragons played games that involved aerial acrobatics. Elders shared stories and knowledge in gathering circles. Kate had been left to die in a dragon nursery. Instead, she had discovered a lost civilization and found her true family. But she knew this was only the beginning. Somewhere above them, Lydia and Zara believed their plan had succeeded. They thought Kate was dead, and the secret of dragon compatibility had died with her. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Kate smiled as she watched her dragon family preparing for something that would change everything. The dragons had been waiting centuries for the right human to return. That human was Kate Morrison, and she was ready to reclaim the ancient alliance. Kate heard the familiar sound of shuttle engines approaching Valdris Prime, almost exactly 1 year after her abandonment. She stood on the highest peak of the mountain range with Storm beneath her and a dozen adult dragons arranged in formation around them. Her primitive clothing had been replaced with garments woven from dragon silk that shimmered with protective properties. Luna perched on her shoulder, having grown to the perfect size for a companion dragon. Ember circled overhead, leading a squadron of young adult dragons who had trained specifically for this moment. Kate no longer looked like the human scientist who had been left to die. She looked like exactly what she had become, a dragon rider and leader of the ancient alliance reborn. The shuttle landed near the original cave entrance just as before. Kate watched through Storm's enhanced vision as 3 figures emerged. Lydia Ashworth looked exactly the same with her perfect silver hair and cold expression. Zara clicked excitedly as she took readings with her equipment. But there was a third figure Kate did not recognize. A tall human man with military bearing and expensive equipment followed the other 2 toward the caves. Kate realized that Lydia had brought backup this time, probably a mercenary hired to deal with any unexpected complications. They clearly expected to find only bones, and perhaps some useful dragon specimens to capture. Kate gave Storm the signal, and they descended toward the cave entrance, with the adult dragons following in precise formation. The sound of massive wings beating filled the air as 20 dragons landed around the startled expedition team. Kate dismounted from Storm with fluid grace and walked toward her former colleagues. Lydia stumbled backward in shock, her scanner falling from nerveless fingers. Zara's mandibles clicked rapidly in what Kate now recognized as the insect equivalent of panic. The human mercenary reached for his weapons, but froze when Ember landed directly behind him, with a rumble that shook the ground. Kate spoke in perfect dragon language, giving commands that sent half the dragons into defensive positions, while the others remained calm but alert. She then switched to standard Galactic Common, addressing her former team with a voice that carried new authority and confidence. She told them they were trespassing on dragon territory and needed to state their business immediately. Lydia found her voice and demanded to know how Kate had survived. How was she controlling the dragons? What had she done to achieve this impossible situation? Kate smiled and explained that she had not done anything. She had simply remembered what humans were meant to be. Partners with dragons rather than competitors with other species, for scraps of galactic influence. The genetic marker Lydia had detected was not just compatibility, but inheritance. Kate was reclaiming her birthright. The human mercenary whose name was Brad Cooper, according to his uniform, tried to assert authority. He announced that he was here, on behalf of the Galactic Research Consortium, to secure valuable specimens for study. Any interference would be met with military force. Luna hissed from Kate's shoulder, while Storm moved closer, with obvious hostile intent. Kate held up her hand, signaling the dragons to wait. She told Brad that he was welcome to try collecting specimens, but he should know that dragons had very specific opinions about being treated as laboratory animals. Zara had been scanning the dragons. Frantically with her equipment, she announced that the creatures showed signs of advanced intelligence and technological development far beyond previous estimates. This was not just an animal colony, but an active civilization with complex social structures and engineering capabilities. Kate nodded and confirmed that dragons were indeed an advanced species, more advanced than elves, insects, or humans in many ways. They had simply chosen to remain hidden from galactic politics until the right moment. That moment had now arrived, thanks to Kate's integration into their society. Lydia demanded proof of Kate's claims. She insisted that dragons were animals regardless of their intelligence. They belonged in research facilities where their abilities could be properly studied and utilized by the superior galactic civilizations. Kate's expression hardened as she responded. She explained that Lydia's attitude was exactly why the dragons had remained hidden. Species like elves and insects saw everything as resources to be exploited rather than partners to be respected. This was about to change. Kate spoke a complex phrase in dragon language, and immediately the air filled with the sound of hundreds of wings. Dragons emerged from caves and crevices throughout the mountain range until the sky was dark with their forms. The expedition team found themselves surrounded by a force that could level cities. But Kate was not finished demonstrating the new reality. She called out another command, and several dragons landed, carrying crystalline devices that hummed with energy. Kate explained that these were communication arrays that connected to a network spanning multiple star systems. The dragons had never been isolated on one world. Dragon civilization extended across dozens of planets and included technology that made current galactic standard equipment look primitive. They had ships that could cross the galaxy in days rather than months. They had weapons that could crack planets and defenses that could stop any known military force. Most importantly, they had been waiting for their human partners to return, so they could rejoin galactic civilization as equals rather than subjects. Kate was the first human in centuries to rediscover the connection. She would not be the last. Lydia tried to negotiate, claiming that her research could benefit everyone. She offered to share credit for the discovery and include Kate in the scientific publications. Zara clicked agreement, suggesting that peaceful cooperation would serve all species better than conflict. Kate laughed and asked what they could possibly offer that dragons did not already possess. Advanced technology. Dragons invented most of it. Galactic influence. Dragons had been traveling between stars before most species discovered fire. Scientific knowledge. Dragons had libraries containing millions of years of accumulated wisdom. The only thing dragons had lacked was their human partners. Now they had Kate, and through her they would reconnect with humanity. The galaxy was about to discover that humans were not a minor species scrambling for recognition. They were half of the most powerful alliance ever known. Brad made the mistake of trying to call for backup on his communication device. The moment he activated the transmitter, every dragon in sight turned toward him with expressions of hostile interest. Kate calmly explained that dragons considered unauthorized communication from their territory to be an act of espionage. The device melted in Brad's hand as Ember demonstrated the precision-controlled dragons had over their flame abilities. Kate told the expedition team that they had two choices. They could leave Valdris Prime immediately and never return, or they could remain as guests under dragon law, which was considerably less forgiving than galactic conventions. Lydia tried one last desperate gambit. She claimed that Kate had been altered by dragon influence and was no longer thinking clearly. No human could abandon their own kind for alien creatures, no matter how impressive those creatures might be. Kate's response was swift and cutting. She pointed out that Lydia had abandoned Kate first, leaving her to die for the sake of scientific advancement. Dragons had welcomed Kate, rescued her, and treated her as family, which behavior seemed more civilized. The three expedition members realized they had no choice but to retreat. As they walked back toward their shuttle, Kate called out final instructions. They were to inform the galactic community that Valdris Prime was under dragon protection. Any future contact would go through Kate Morrison, human ambassador to the Dragon Alliance. Kate watched their shuttle disappear into the sky, knowing that everything was about to change. The dragons had been patient, but they were tired of hiding. With human partners, they would reclaim their place in the galaxy. Luna chirped softly on her shoulder while Storm rumbled with satisfaction. Ember landed nearby with the other young dragons, all looking to Kate for guidance. She had been left to die as an expendable human scientist. Now, she was the bridge between two civilizations and the key to reshaping galactic politics. Kate Morrison was no longer just surviving in the dragon nursery. She was ruling it. 6 months after the expedition's hasty departure, Kate stood in the newly constructed Alliance Hall, watching representatives from dozens of species wait nervously for an audience. The massive chamber had been carved from living rock by dragon flame and human engineering working in perfect harmony. Crystalline communication arrays lined the walls, connecting Valdris Prime to every major world in the galaxy. Kate wore robes of deep blue dragon silk, marked with symbols of her new rank, Ambassador Prime of the Dragon-Human Alliance. Luna had grown large enough to serve as both companion and mount, while remaining small enough to accompany Kate indoors. Storm and Ember flanked her throne as official guardians, each now bearing their own titles in the Alliance hierarchy. The first delegation consisted of 3 Elven Council members, including Dr. Lydia Ashworth. The proud elves had been forced to request a formal meeting after dragon ships appeared in orbit around their homeworld. The ships had done nothing threatening, but their mere presence made it clear that Elven military superiority was no longer guaranteed. Kate received them with cool politeness. She listened as they offered trade agreements, technology exchanges, and research partnerships. Everything they said revealed their fundamental misunderstanding of the situation. They still thought dragons were powerful animals that humans had somehow tamed for their own use. Luna translated the Elven words into dragon language for the assembled council of adult dragons, who observed from elevated platforms. The dragons found Elven arrogance amusing rather than offensive. They had been dealing with such attitudes for millennia, and were curious to see how Kate would handle the situation. Kate explained that dragons were not pets or allies of humanity. Dragons and humans were partners in a civilization that predated Elven spaceflight by thousands of years. The Alliance was not seeking junior partner status with existing galactic powers. They were announcing their return as the dominant force in known space. Lydia stepped forward with her familiar cold smile. She suggested that Kate had been isolated too long and was suffering from psychological effects of extended contact with alien influences. Proper human medical care could restore her to normal thinking patterns and allow for rational negotiations. The insult was calculated to provoke an emotional response that would undermine Kate's authority. Instead, Kate smiled and spoke a complex phrase in dragon language. Every dragon in the chamber responded with what sounded like laughter. Kate explained that dragons found the concept of Elven medical superiority particularly amusing given their own regenerative abilities and 1,000-year lifespans. Kate then demonstrated why she no longer considered herself bound by Elven opinions of human limitations. She placed her hand on a control crystal, and immediately holographic displays filled the air around them. Star charts showing dragon territory that encompassed more than half the galaxy. Technical specifications for ships that could cross between galactic arms. Weapons capable of turning entire solar systems into energy. The Elven delegation realized they were not negotiating with a human who had befriended some powerful animals. They were facing a civilization that could end Elven expansion with minimal effort. Their expressions shifted from condescension to barely concealed fear. Kate offered the elves a simple choice. They could acknowledge dragon-human sovereignty over their claimed territories and accept junior partnership status in exchange for protection and limited technology access. Or they could maintain their current hostile stance and find themselves excluded from the new galactic order entirely. The next delegation came from the Insectoid Trade Federation led by creatures similar to Zara. They buzzed and clicked nervously as they presented gifts of rare metals and manufacturing equipment. Kate accepted their offerings graciously while making it clear that dragons had been mining asteroids and crafting with exotic materials since before the Federation existed. The insects were more pragmatic than the elves. They quickly grasped that resistance was futile and began negotiating for favorable trade positions. Kate appreciated their direct approach, but made it clear that dragon-human values would determine trading policies, Exploitation of weaker species and predatory economic practices would not be tolerated. Representatives from the human colonial governments arrived in a state of confused excitement. They had received reports of a human controlling dragons, but had dismissed them as impossible propaganda. Seeing Kate in her position of authority left them speechless with amazement and pride. Kate greeted her fellow humans warmly but firmly, established the new hierarchy. Colonial governments could join the alliance as equal partners, but they would need to accept dragon law and customs. Humans who demonstrated the proper genetic markers and psychological compatibility could train as dragon riders and alliance officers. The human delegates eagerly agreed to everything Kate proposed. They understood that alliance with dragons elevated humanity from a struggling colonial species to the most powerful force in the galaxy. Some humans would need to adapt to new ways of thinking, but the benefits were beyond measure, Kate announced. The establishment of the Dragon Rider Academy on Valdris Prime, where humans would learn to partner with dragons for exploration, defense, and diplomacy. Luna would serve as the primary trainer for new human-dragon pairs, while Storm and Ember would lead the advanced combat training programs. Over the following weeks, delegations arrived from every major species and political entity in known space. Some came seeking alliance, others hoping to negotiate neutrality, and a few preparing for inevitable conflict. Kate received them all with the confidence of someone who held overwhelming advantages. The dragons had been patient in sharing their true capabilities. Their ships appeared throughout the galaxy, not as invaders, but as explorers, returning to space they had once claimed. Ancient dragon colonies were reactivated on worlds that other species had thought uninhabited. Communication networks that spanned galactic distances came online after centuries of dormancy. Kate established new policies that reflected both human values and dragon wisdom. Scientific research would continue, but with respect for intelligent species rather than exploitation. Trade would be regulated to prevent the economic domination of weaker civilizations. Military conflicts would be minimized through the overwhelming deterrent of dragon power. The most satisfying moment came when Brad Cooper arrived as part of a military delegation from the Galactic Research Consortium. The same mercenary who had threatened to capture dragon specimens now stood in chains before Kate's throne, charged with crimes against an allied civilization. Kate could have ordered his execution or imprisonment, but chose a more fitting punishment. Brad was assigned to work in the dragon nurseries, caring for young dragons under Luna's supervision. He would learn firsthand that dragons were not animals to be captured, but intelligent beings deserving of respect. Lydia made one final attempt to undermine Kate's authority. She published research papers claiming that Kate had been brainwashed by alien pheromones and was no longer competent to represent human interests. The papers were distributed throughout human space in an attempt to create opposition to the alliance. Kate's response was swift and devastating. She released video communications showing dragon technology in action. Ships that moved faster than anything previously imagined. Weapons that could reshape planetary surfaces. Most importantly, she showed dragons and humans working together as equals in ways that made every other species relationship look primitive. The papers were quickly forgotten as human populations realized what Kate had achieved. She had not just survived abandonment on an alien world. She had rediscovered humanity's greatest destiny and reclaimed their rightful place as partners with the most magnificent species in the galaxy. Kate stood on the observation deck of the Alliance flagship, watching construction begin on the first new dragon-human city in 1,000 years. Luna perched beside her, while Storm and Ember flew patrol patterns around the massive construction site. Hundreds of dragons and humans worked together, using combined technologies that surpassed anything either species could achieve alone. Dr. Lydia Ashworth had left Kate Morrison to die in a dragon nursery, believing that humans were expendable in the great game of galactic politics. Instead, Kate had discovered that humans were never meant to be minor players, scrambling for recognition. They were meant to rule the stars, alongside dragons as partners in the greatest alliance ever known. Kate Morrison had been left to die, but had chosen to live, and in living had changed the fate of every species in the galaxy. The Human-Dragon Alliance was no longer a legend from ancient history. It was the future, and Kate Morrison was its architect.